Hello everybody. This is our sixth class in the course on technology and human rights advocacy, and as you all know, we have 2 more weeks to go, so we're gonna shift to the second gear and we'll try to accelerate a little bit, especially with our campaign plan. So by this class we will cover all the elements of the campaign plan, which means that you will have enough material to put the campaign plan together. So let me just move to the next slide and just cover again all the elements of the campaign plan, which is the final assignment. So we already focused on the objective, and in that session we asked ourselves about the objectives using the SMART criteria, if you remember. But the main question was, what do we want to achieve? So this is probably the first question we asked ourselves when we are developing the campaign. We also worked on the message using the spectrum of allies, and by using spectrum of allies we isolated different targets of our tailored communication strategy, and then using the message box for these targets we developed the message. Last week we talked about tactics in general and different kinds of conveying the message, but more connected to the online campaigns and digital activism and use of information technology. We talked about blogging, we talked about the use of photos, and we also touched upon the use of video in the dissemination of the message. But most importantly, we looked back at the telling the story lesson, which was the second lesson in this course, and we talked about the ways the information is structured in inverted pyramid structure, and with putting all the information up front in order to reach the audience. That, combined with the message developed with the message box, would serve as the basic method of delivering the message. And so this week we're going to look at the organization and resources, meaning we're going to look at we're going to answer the question, how do we do this? How do we implement a campaign? And because, you know, the objectives on its own, or campaign message on its own, even the blogs and different tactics on their own, they don't constitute a campaign. In order to have a full functioning campaign, we need to have organization around it. So in this particular class, we're going to talk about organization, and we're also going to talk about resources needed for the campaign. So let's look at the organization. So I will invite you now to help me in figuring out all the tasks that are necessary for implementation of a campaign. So we're starting very, how shall I say, with a relatively blank screen. And on this screen we can see, I just put 2 things. First are the goals, and second is the environment. Goals being what a campaign or our advocacy effort wants to reach. This is the goal of our effort. This is what we would like to see in the end, etc., etc. This is something that we're going to put on one side of the screen. On the other side of the screen is the environment we're working in. These are all the conditions that we are facing. These are all the obstacles, all the opportunities, all the things that we are operating under. These are our technological constraints, our political constraints, other different opportunities that may arise in our environment. And so since the, how should I say, some sort of a tentative definition of an organization is an entity or a group of people that is at the same time has certain goals of activity of that organization, but also operates in an environment, we will now try to list a couple of activities or let's call them operations that an organization is doing that are connected to either to the goal or the environment. So if you have any ideas, what are the typical activities of an organization that constitute an organization, I would like you to either put them in the chat box on the side, or you can even use the text tool on the whiteboard, and you can type them in directly. If you don't type them in, if you type them in the chat box, I will type them in this box here. So the question once again is, what are some examples of activities that that can be seen in different kinds of organizations that are, let's say, regular activities of organizations? Any ideas? Let me try to put one. One, for instance, activity is analysis. So this would be an activity of an organization where the organization analyzes the environment and kind of creates an assessment of what is going on.
Hello, I think one item that the organization do for reaching to the goals is the mobilization. Mobilization means providing the enough resources for the budget or the human resource to reach the goals.
Okay, fantastic. Fantastic, thank you. So this is another, oh, I forgot to put, okay. So this is another one. Any more ideas? Okay, let me add one more. Planning is something organizations regularly do. And evaluating plans. Okay, so this is another thing. Any more ideas? Thoughts? Acting, exactly. Acting, or we can call them also. We can call that also implementing plans. Yes, implementing plans, acting. Okay, also, you know, another important thing is feedback, or actually, which is connected to evaluation of the plans, and this is looking at the impact of what we are doing, analyzing it. Any more ideas? What would be some other? Replanning, exactly, that's another thing. Or another way to put it is, let's call it replanning. Sounds good. I'm trying to find a better word based on feedback. Exactly. So this is another thing. What do you think? Is a part of the organization also capacity building? That's another thing. What would be a capacity building? For instance, education of activists. Or, for instance, recruitment. This is bringing new activists. Or, for instance, fundraising. So this would be another. We can put a lot of these activities, but as you can see, there is a lot of work to be done in an organization of a human rights advocacy effort. So although we focused a lot on planning in the previous few lessons of the course, we looked at developing the message, defining the strategic goals, etc., etc. There are other things, very important things that the organization of a campaign needs to do. So let's try to structure these. You know, we listed a lot of activities here, but they can be actually put into let's call them 3 groups of activities. First group are planning activities. This is everything that has to do with analyzing the environment, creating plans that relate to goals, and then doing additional planning, doing any kind of assessment of how plans were implemented and how they can be implemented better. Anything that has to do with planning or replanning activities is one type of activity. Another type of activity over here is implementation. So we talked about planning, and now we talk about implementation. Implementation is everything that we covered in the last class. Writing those blogs, making all those videos, doing the necessary, organizing necessary tactics, anything that is going to put the plan into action are activities based on implementation. And they constitute implementation. And then the third thing is actually what is called organization management. And organization management is everything that is connected to the organization itself, not necessarily to the goals and not necessarily to the environment. So these are everything connected to routine tasks, to capacity building, to education of activists, to improvement of internal procedures or changes in the organizational structure, anything that the organization is doing to, let's say, redefine or to recreate itself. So these 3 types of activities, one connected to planning, to creative work, to analysis, another connected to implementation, to action, and the third one connected to management of the organization. So any ideas on what should, actually not what should, but what usually takes most of the time and most of the effort and most of the energy, what kind of activities, planning activities, management activities, or implementation activities in regular let's say campaigns or organizations? Any thoughts? Any ideas? How should I say, takes the bulk of our time and energy? Okay, we have one comment here. It's the management that takes most. Any other thoughts? Okay, so far we just have the implementation and management. Okay, some people think that it's implementation that takes most of the time and most of the energy, but I haven't heard the planning so far. And now I would like to rephrase. The question, and now ask again. What deserves most of the time that the organization could dedicate? In other words, what would you like to see the time spent most on in an organization of a human rights advocacy effort? So this is not what is currently happening or what is usually happening, but what would be, how should I say, the best case scenario. And so we have one of the answers, strategy, or as it is written here, planning. And indeed, ideally, if we could spend more time planning, analysis, and assessment, and less time doing routine tasks and implementation, that would be actually better. And this is the main goal of organization building and creating organization around the campaign. Because the main thing for the organization is to create a structure where implementation and organization management could be done relatively easily without a lot of need for a micromanagement and a lot of need for attention, so that the leadership of the campaign and the creators of the campaign can actually spend more time planning, analyzing, looking at the feedback, looking at the impact that the campaign is making, without actually spending too much time on routine tasks, on management, on other things. So, to put it in other words, the reason why we're going to look at organization, and the reason why we're going to look at the organization management in general, is because we want to increase time and energy spent on planning. Okay, so when we look at these three levels, or actually these three groups of activities, so far we looked at planning when we discussed SMART objectives, and when we discussed the message box, and when we discussed the spectrum of allies. And these are all planning methodologies and planning exercises that we used. So we were analyzing the environment, we were defining our goals based on the criteria that they're specific, measurable, achievable, relevant and timely. We also looked at the spectrum of allies and intended behavior of different groups that we want to reach with our message. We looked at the message box and tried to analyze what they think about themselves, what they think about us, each of those groups, and what we think about them, and what we also say about us. And these are all planning activities that will allow us to go into the implementation. And then we looked at the implementation when we last week talked about blogs, and when we talked about photos and videos. But these are the results of the planning. This is what is coming out of the planning process and the implementation process, and this is something that is reaching the wider audience. So these are the two things that we covered. Now we're going into the management, where we're going to look at the resources, or how do we manage resources. We're going to look at the skills, and we're going to look at the structure of the human rights advocacy effort, or actually structure of the organization that is running a campaign. Okay, so before I go into the next slide, I have a question. If we can list resources, if you can give me some ideas, what constitutes resources? We have already here that on this slide that under mobilization, one of the activities was providing material and human resources. Is there any other resource besides material and human resources? Do you have any idea? Is there anything else that we can add to the list of human resources and material resources? Financial resources. Exactly. Financial resources are also, let's say, a group of material resources, because most of the material resources are actually financial. But we can put them as a separate or as a subgroup of material resources. But these are things, anything, money, access to infrastructure, to technological equipment, access to, let's say, material like paper for printing, or access to printing presses, etc., etc. So money is also one of the resources, probably the one that can actually give us all the other material resources relatively easily. But any other resource that we may think about? Any thoughts? Managing talents. Well, yeah, talents are also an interesting resource. Exactly, this is inside human resources. So human resources are not just, and we're going to talk about it a bit later, they're not just numbers, but they're also what kind of people are part of the effort. Not just how many people support, but what can they provide in terms of skills, in terms of talent, in terms of their creativity. So this is all part of human resources. Okay, I won't keep you any longer and ask you to guess what would be the third resource. When we talk about resources, we usually talk about material resources, human resources, and time. And time is also an important resource. And in a minute we will figure out why is that. But let's go, I already talked a bit about it. So when we talk about material resources, there is a substitute for any material resource, and that is money. So if we have money, we can have access to any sort of material resource. But it's not always that money is the sole material resource. And if I remember my experience from Otpor back in the 90s in Serbia, for instance, one of the very important resources that we had access to was coffee that was provided to us by a local coffee shop as a sort of support for the movement. So we actually never had to spend any money or to, how shall I say, invest any money in our coffee that was consumed in the Otpor, both in the Otpor, let's say, official office and in the hidden headquarters, because we were provided with coffee by the local coffee shop. So material resources can go from anything as how shall I say, mundane or ordinary like coffee, or it can be in a form of big financial or any other endowment that the organization has access to, so they can actually spend on advertising, on campaigns. Or another thing is human resources. Human resources, as I said earlier, both in terms of quantity and quality, both in terms of number of people who support and who participate in the cause, and also in terms of what they bring to the cause. What are their skills, what are their talents, and what are the things that they can do actually. And then the third resource, a very important one, is time. And the reason why why time is such an important resource is that it is actually equal to all. It is rich and poor. The time passes at the same pace for both rich and poor, and time passes at the same pace for both those who are big in numbers and those who are few in numbers. So time is a big equalizer for the purposes of management and the resource management. And this is why we will look at time in a bit separate manner from the other resources. But anyway, let's look at the material resources. So as I said, material resources can actually provide you with a lot of opportunities. But the problem is that the human rights advocacy campaigns don't have access to material resources. So one of the important things in organizing campaigns is figuring out low-cost alternatives for activities that are intended. So I here listed a couple of activities, and now together we will try to look at some low-cost alternatives to them. So, for instance, let's say an intended activity in a human rights advocacy effort is the production of TV commercials, which are filmed in the studio and they are broadcast on a sort of TV network or a number of TV networks, and these are mostly paid commercials. So if we don't have enough material resources to organize that, what would be a low-cost alternative? And here we have already the first answer, and that is YouTube and viral videos. Yeah, that would be an alternative to, and I will just add viral videos. Instead of printed material, posters, flyers, etc., we can have digital materials. Indeed, we can have, for instance, instead of sending flyers, we can send out emails, or we can post a web. We can set a website or something like that. We can use Twitter. Okay, we have also Facebook. We also have here Facebook videos. Okay, so what would be a low-cost alternative to having an office with operating hours 9 to 5 every day, where there is a person sitting at the desk and where people can come in and they can actually find somebody and talk to somebody who is representing organization, etc. So okay, so we have the alternatives are parks, university, cafes. Indeed, regular meetings are also good. That people actually have. Let's say every Thursday or every Wednesday there is somebody there. So, for instance, if we look at Otpor, which is the movement I belong to, we didn't have an office, neither a regular or a hidden one. For we only got an office in the last year of our activity, and this was an apartment that was given to us by a mother of one of our activists. But before that, we actually managed to run the whole movement from cafes, and that was actually an important, how shall I say, an important and I don't know why this is lost. This was an important meeting point for us, because we would go and plan everything in a cafe, although we didn't have an operating office. Okay, an online forum. That's another. Online forum is another way to compensate for that, and a blog. Also, mailing lists. There are other ways to communicate. Google Hangout. That's another way to do it. And of course, as somebody already said, an alternative to professional staff are volunteers. So what I wanted to share with you here is that lack of material resources is not an obstacle, especially because modern technology allows us to compensate for the lack of material resources. So even if we cannot compensate for everything, and even if we cannot substitute every activity with a low-cost alternative, there are a lot of activities that can be substituted, and these 4 examples just show that there is a possibility provided by the technology. So to put it in there is a quote by an anonymous author which says, lack of resources makes you resourceful. So it's not just that you know, we can find low-cost alternatives, but we're also, when we don't have access to material resources, we are actually much more creative in figuring out the alternatives to the and yes, as somebody said, necessity is mother of all inventions. Exactly. So that is certainly true, and there are a lot of examples where of human rights advocacy efforts which became so successful in attracting a lot of material resources at the very beginning because they sounded promising, so that because of that they never became creative enough to develop a good campaign. In other words, you know, they were too promising, so that actually they became less resourceful, and they actually never managed to create anything with bigger impact. I can recall meeting a group of dissidents from Belarus a long time ago. This was 10 years ago, and when they started actually organizing their campaign, there was such a big need for such a campaign that everybody actually went to support them, and they were too small, and they became not just supported by various groups and organizations, but they also, their expectations were high, and they actually didn't create internal capacity of their organization to do all that, because they were, you know, just the support was too big for them to take. Another example of that is also Occupy Wall Street, which happened last year, and the occupiers of Wall Street just gathered down in Zuccotti Park, and after 2 weeks they got such a huge support from everybody, and they didn't even have time to develop their own internal capacity, and that's why they actually never actually managed to get out of Zuccotti Park and to build their movement bigger. By the end of the year, their occupation actually ended, and so now they exist on a different level. But lack of resources makes you resourceful, and if we look at some very inspiring examples from the past, we can see that actually this lack of resources was crucial. For instance, if we look at Solidarity in Poland, the first couple of years of their operation, they actually were faced with the total lack of not just material resources, but they also were under severe repression, and that actually made them stronger and more resourceful. And I would like to think that one of the reasons why Otpor was so successful was because of a decade-long fight against Milosevic, that Otpor was just how shall I say, the last step, but this also actually helped. Okay, so when we talk about the alternative to highly paid campaigns that are dependent on material resources, the first thing that comes to mind is so-called grassroots marketing or guerrilla marketing. So does anybody know or has a good definition of grassroots marketing or guerrilla marketing that they could share with us? Absorbing people to participate in direct action. That can be a good definition of guerrilla marketing or grassroots marketing. Does anybody know what this picture here represents? What is going on here? This is a picture from Copenhagen, and this is a sculpture in Copenhagen, and the sculpture is covered with plastic junk. And this is part of a campaign to raise awareness of the junk that the residents of Copenhagen were throwing into the sea. And so the beaches of the city and the docks of the city harbor were full of plastic bottles and plastic bags and all kind of stuff. So a group of environmentalists decided to raise awareness about that, and they did it by putting plastic garbage or plastic junk on. This is one of the most popular sculptures over there, and so it's in the city. So guerrilla marketing or grassroots marketing actually is a low-cost alternative to mass media marketing or mainstream marketing that people. So yes, it is dependent on the interaction with the users or the interactions of the recipients, but it also has some other qualities. And this picture here, the sculpture covered with plastic, actually shows some of the elements of the grassroots marketing. First, grassroots marketing is cheap. So you don't have TV commercials, you depend on YouTube videos. You don't have paid advertisement in the newspapers or printed flyers or something like that. You have blogs and websites that you can. So it's much cheaper than the regular marketing. It needs to be interesting. So, for instance, this particular picture shows that people who are walking down the park and looking at this statue are going to be puzzled with what is going on. What is happening with this statue? It needs to be clever, and it needs to be surprising, which is definitely the case here. It also needs to be personal, because it depends on the people, because as one of the comments here says, it's about absorbing people to participate in direct action. So you need to be personal if you want to absorb these people. It needs to be viral, inclusive as well, and also frequent, because this is how people are going to see that something is happening. If you're all over the place with your grassroots marketing effort, that is going to be noticed by the people. So if we compare grassroots marketing with mainstream marketing, we can see that in mainstream marketing you need a lot of material resources. You need money for all the commercials, for all the TV ads, newspaper ads and stuff. And in grassroots marketing you depend on people and their time, because this is what people are going to be doing. They're going to be sharing things on Facebook, or they're going to be going around using word of mouth or something like that. But mainstream marketing depends on professionals, and grassroots marketing depends on volunteers. Mainstream marketing focuses on competition, which is, as you can see in all the big advertisement that is happening, they are always trying to confront themselves with their competitors. And so, for instance, the last one is, the big fight between Apple and Samsung, who is better, or why should you buy this product, not that product. And in grassroots marketing, the focus is on cooperation with the users, and as one of the comments here said, interaction with the user. So it's not just you are telling the users what your message is, but you're also getting something from them, and you're trying to include them in the effort as well. And in mainstream marketing, it's all about direct communication. So the effort is to reach the recipients directly, and in grassroots marketing there is a lot of indirect communication. So you are reaching some people only for them to reach other people. So maybe you're gonna reach the recipient of your message. You're not gonna reach him directly, but through somebody. So a word of mouth is an important aspect of grassroots marketing. And when we talk about quantity versus quality, in mainstream marketing, it's all about quantity. You know, you, for instance, somebody wants to sell a BMW, so they pay a TV, or they pay a TV ad, or they pay a newspaper ad. So all the people are going to read, who read that newspaper, they're going to see that ad, and maybe only 5% of those people are potential BMW customers. Maybe only 5% of those people have enough money to afford a BMW, or they have preference for a BMW. But this is how mainstream marketing works. In grassroots marketing, we are talking about targeting people. We do not reach everybody. We reach people who are interested in the topic and let them reach other people who are interested in the topic first before we go to the larger audience. But this is where indirect communication also comes in. So in grassroots marketing, we're talking about not producing a lot of materials, but actually having a quality materials that are going to reach the people who are going to read, or who are going to act upon that. That's why the success of viral videos is not in the number of hits or number of views, but in the real impact that they make. If they reached only 1,000 people, but the right 1,000 people, it's much better than so-called viral videos that reach 1 million people without any impact. This is very important because people sometimes make a confusion. They don't make a distinction between the two, and it's actually about targeting the right group and communicating the message to them. Okay, so to sum it up, the difference between mainstream marketing and grassroots marketing, the most important one is in terms of impact. If you have a lot of money, you're going to put a lot of money in the TV ads and different promotional activities and whatever, and you're going to reach a maximum impact very, very soon. And this is going to be the pinnacle of your campaign. But then the impact is going to decline over time as people get tired, or as people get bored with the same advertising, etc., etc. In grassroots marketing, because the effort is to reach the targeted group, who is then going to reach out to the others, and through indirect communication they're going to create the momentum later on. You don't see a big impact in the beginning, but slowly over time this increases, and you finally have impact later as the campaign develops and as the campaign actually becomes more as there are more people here who are participating in the campaign. So that would be the difference between these two campaigns. Do we have any questions so far before I go into the next segment? If there are any questions, this is the right time to ask them. Okay, we have one question here. You want me to explain grassroots marketing. If we look at what happens, the difference between mainstream marketing and grassroots marketing, because mainstream marketing is dependent on material resources more than on human resources. You, as a big company or as a big organization that has enough resources to use on mainstream marketing, you're going to invest a lot of money in promotion, TV advertising, newspaper advertising, events that can be organized, and there is a lot of buzz that is created out of that. So a lot of people talk about it, and a lot of people are influenced by it directly, and then after some time they get bored and they move on to something else, and there are other things. In the grassroots marketing, because it develops over time, it builds slowly, so people don't know about it in the beginning, and then later when they hear from their neighbors, from their friends, from the people around them, they kind of get interested, and they get how shall I say, attracted to the message, and we can say that the grassroots marketing has an impact. Of course, after some time people also get bored, but not as quickly as they do in the mainstream marketing, because something that was very slow in building will be very slow in declining. Something that took a lot of time to build is not just let's say a temporary thing, because a lot of people are actually not just changing their behavior, but they're actually embracing the message of the grassroots marketing effort. So it's not that easy for this message to become as saturated. It's not easy for the audience to be saturated with the message as quickly as they are in the mainstream marketing effort. And the reason for that is the peer component, because you hear from your neighbors and from your friends about it, you don't hear it on TV, and this is the big strength of grassroots marketing, because it is depending on the people. Okay, so we have a question here.
One of the resources that you mentioned is the time, and according to this graph, for grassroots marketing, which we are going to use during our campaign, we have to spend a lot of time. Does it make any conflict between our resources, or does it damage or ruin our resources?
That's an excellent question. And indeed, the time here is an important resource, because here the impact of the grassroots marketing is dependent on time. It only happens later. So this is a crucial period for the human rights advocacy group. This is the crucial period, because here, if people lose enthusiasm in this first period, if they lose enthusiasm here, nothing is going to happen later, because the enthusiasm is going to drop, impact is going to drop, and nothing is going to happen. So this is the most important, how shall I say, critical period for this marketing effort. Well, unfortunately, there is a question here that is there a reference for this graph? Well, the graph itself doesn't exist so far, and this is more like a visual representation that I developed, but it's actually based on the analysis of these campaigns, both grassroots marketing campaigns and mainstream campaigns. But I will share with you, and when we discuss this later in the forum, I will share with you the articles, and you will see that the graph is just a visual representation of that. But what it shows is actually that, the impact of grassroots marketing actually happens only after certain time passes. It's not something that is going to happen very soon. Okay, so let's move on, because we have other things to cover. So as we said, the grassroots marketing campaigns are dependent on time and on human resources. And when we talk about human resources, we're talking about organizers, activists, and supporters. So when we talk about organizers, these are the people who are actually doing most of the organizational management. They are managing the organization, and they're also doing a lot of planning, assessment of the impact of the plans, feedback, collecting feedback on what the plans were doing. So they're pretty much behind the organization of the campaign. These are campaign planners, these are analysts, these are people who are writing blogs, who are producing video material, etc., etc. So they are behind the organizing of the campaign. And then, you know, when we have activists usually take an important role in the implementation. These are the people who are joining the activities. They are spreading the word. They are sharing that on the social networks. They may be involved to a certain extent in the planning or any other effort, but not so much as the organizers. And then you have the supporters, which are, you know, just, you know, liking your page on Facebook, or they're, you know, just saying, oh, this is a great job you're doing, but they don't actually do much. They're not active in this support. They're just supporting. So when we look back at the spectrum of allies, if you remember that, we said that, you know, you always want to move your passive supporters to make them more active supporters. So you are trying actually to, you know, move people closer to the center, you know, from supporters to activists, and from activists to organizers, and of course, another important thing is from general public. You want the general public to make them, to turn them into supporters. So if we distinguish these three groups: organizers that are, you know, in charge of the strategy and the campaign development, all that stuff; activists who are concerned with implementation and different tactics; and when we talk about supporters who are just supporting an effort but they are not actively contributing, we are now going to look at some ways how to manage these three groups of people in online campaigns. So the first question that we're going to ask ourselves is, what do these people, what do we want them to do? What is the how shall I say, the regular activity of these different groups? And then the next question is, what is the platform, or what is the organizational framework in which they're going to be doing it? So I'm gonna give you an example with the first group, and then you can add others as well. So let me give you an example. Organizers, one of the things they do is they are involved in planning. And how do they, or let's say, brainstorming ideas about campaign that they're doing, and so how they are doing this? And the way they're doing it, it can be done by using a discussion board or a forum. Okay, so what are the other activities that we would like to see these different groups doing? And then we can see what are the ways for them to do it. Let's say one of the things for the organizers is also defining vision and mission. Indeed. Activists are involved in implementation. So activists can actually, the implementation of an online campaign can be writing articles about an issue. And the way they can do that is they can use a certain, let's say, blogging platform. Okay, any other ideas? What activists may be? What we want activists to do? Okay, supporters are spreading the message indirectly and developing the campaign inside the public. Yes, this is the indirect communication that we talked about. Because we are in grassroots marketing effort, we're usually not reaching the end user or end recipient directly, but we are actually doing that through our supporters and activists. Okay, any other thoughts? Activists are also promoters of the campaign, indeed, and they can supporters are following the plans. Okay, so as you can see from these several inputs, is that there are several platforms that can be used for a single advocacy effort, for a single campaign. And these platforms some are better suited for some things, and some are better suited for some other things. So activists are also finding the best method through the goals which is already defined from the organizer's part. Exactly. This is one thing about the autonomy of the activist that needs to have the goals and the guidelines, but needs to have freedom to find the best way to disseminate this message, not wait for the leadership of the campaign to tell him or her what to do, but actually, so finding the best method is another thing what activists may do. So in order to do that, they have to have some sort of internal communication platform, so that they can actually figure that out. And what else do we want the supporters to do? Is there anything else that we can think about supporters? So we have another thing here. Exactly, they become activists. Okay, so they're we want them to become activists. Indeed, this is an important part. And they're also spreading the message. Here, for the supporters, what we need to figure out is the platform that they're going to be using is the platform that is prevalent in the community or society. So this is important because here, for instance, we can have for organizers and for activists. We can, for instance, use Ushahidi mapping platform. And this can help us analyze the situation in the country, and we can see what is going on in which part, and we can actually use that platform to gather information about, events or incidents or anything like that. However, as we can see, this we can only actually ask our activists and our organizers to use this platform. So they would be feeding information into the map, and we would know from this map, we would have like a very good overview of what is going on. But we cannot expect our supporters or the general public to use something that is not already prevalent in the society, some platform that is not already used by the majority of the people. So we have to, when figuring out which platform are we going to use to communicate with our supporters, that needs to be a platform that they are already using, which means that we cannot introduce something new like, for instance, Shahidi to communicate with them if they're not using it. For organizers and for activists, we can do it. So that's why for organizers and for activists, we can set up internal communication platform, which is something we cannot set up for our supporters. Okay, so because we have 20 more minutes or so, we're gonna go to the next and the last and the most crucial resource, and that is time. And of course, time is always pressing because we never have enough time, because there are always new things that need to be done, and there are things that usually take more time than we expected them to. So there are always more stuff to do than the time that we have left. So time management is actually a very important part of the resource management in general. When we look at the whole triangle of human resources, material resources, and time, it's well balanced. So if you have a lot of money, then things will take less time because they will be done much more quickly. We saw that example when we compared mainstream marketing with grassroots marketing. If you can invest a lot of money in TV commercials, the message will reach out to a wider audience very quickly. If you don't have enough money, then as you can see here, things are going to take more time. If you have more money, things are going to take less time. The same thing is, if you have more money, you will need less volunteers to work on a campaign. If you don't have enough money, you will need a lot of volunteers, because people, you don't obviously have money to pay professionals. If you have a lot of volunteers at your disposal, then you can actually, things can be done in less time. If you don't have enough people, then it will take you longer to get things done. So management of time is actually done through management of material and human resources. And the more we invest, especially in human resources, this is how we're going to manage our time much more efficiently. So that actually there are more people contributing to the effort, the things are going to be done overall much more quickly because of that. So, but it is important here to know that you cannot have everything. You cannot have a cheap, short and small campaign. It's either going to be cheap and short, but then it will have to be big, or it has to be expensive and short, and then it can be small. So the thing here is that an ideal campaign is impossible, because you will have to pay on one end if you want to compensate on the other end. And when we talk about grassroots marketing efforts, we're talking about the management on this side, because money here is usually something that we don't have access to, but we're trying to manage our human resources in regard to time, because as you remember, when we defined SMART objectives, the last letter in SMART was timely. So we need to figure out the time at the very beginning of the campaign when we are looking at the objectives of the campaign, and when do we want these objectives to be achieved. And based on that, we're going to project our human resources accordingly. How many people do we need at what point in time, etc., etc. So we're looking at this nexus, time and people. And so a thing that is a very handy exercise here, and this is in this example that I'm using here is a tactical, but it can also be applied for much longer plans. And the exercise is so-called reverse planning. Reverse planning is actually something that you do to figure out how much time you will need for a particular thing. And then, or if you are pressed with time and that you have to do it on a particular day and you have only limited time to do it, then it actually helps you figure out how can you speed it up by adding more people to the task. Excuse me. So the example that we're going to use here is we're going to organize a Saturday lunch, and so for that lunch we need to plan all the activities that are necessary to for this event to happen. So these activities are everything from planning the menu, buying food, cooking, inviting people, getting whatever else is needed, etc., etc. So what we're going to do now in this very short exercise, and it's not going to last long, is we're going to put different activities on different days before Saturday, and we're going to try to see how much time we will actually need to create this lunch, which means that it's going to happen on Saturday, but we don't know when are we going to start. Are we going to start on Friday? Are we going to start on Thursday? Or are we going to start on Wednesday? So let's fill it in, and we're going to fill it in by, as I said, reverse planning. So the first thing we're going to fill in is all the necessary things that need to be done for the lunch to happen, and that is going to be on Friday. So this is where we're going to prepare the lunch. And the reason why we're going to prepare it on Friday is because we don't have enough room on Saturday in the calendar. So let's see what are the activities that are necessary to create this to organize the Saturday lunch. Okay, so we have one thing here which says invite people on Monday. Well, maybe, but if we do that like that, we're not reverse planning. So let's see from the back. Let's see what are the last things that we need to do to have the lunch done. Because if we invite people on Monday, that is not going to make us. That is not going to prepare a lunch for us. So let's reverse plan. Let's see what needs to happen on Friday in order for lunch to happen. Okay, so we have to cook meals and set the table. Exactly. Okay, so cook meals, set the table. Okay. And then what do we need to do before that? We need to do shopping. Okay, so we're going to go shopping on Thursday. So we're going to buy groceries on Thursday. Is there anything else that we want to do? Do we want to plan what we're going to eat and drink? When are we going to do that? We're going to plan the menu on Wednesday. And so we are going to invite people when? We're gonna invite people on Tuesday. Okay, so what this tells us is that we're gonna invite people, and based on and on Monday we can actually decide who to invite. That's true. But this actually tells us that, that we will see what are the crucial events in this whole preparation of the lunch. And we can actually reverse plan and see what needs to happen before something else happens. So, of course, in order to have lunch, we need to cook food. In order to cook food, we need to buy groceries. In order to buy groceries, we need to plan the menu so that we know what we're going to cook and how much. And in order to do that, we need to invite people and to see who is going to come, who is not going to come, so that we know, what kind of food we want to buy and what are the amounts that we want to buy. And then of course we need to decide who do we want to invite in the first place. So reverse planning, actually this is a very, how shall I say, simple exercise, but it actually allows us to look at every important element of the successful planning of an event, and then to see when is the time that this needs to happen, so that we actually don't plan 2 weeks in advance, or we don't plan 2 days in advance, but we actually have a realistic time frame which is not too long but is not too short. And then when we plan our core activities, then we can add other things. For instance, on Friday we can call people and remind them that there is going to be lunch tomorrow. And then on Sunday, for instance, we can call them again and tell them, I hope you like the lunch, how did you like it, would you like to see, what if we see each other again one day, etc., etc. So some sort of a follow-up, so that you can actually, or we can text them, it's cheaper, exactly, we don't need to call them at all. but if we plan our core activities, then we can actually find room for some extra activities too. And that can be, we can go and get ourselves some, new music for them, for it to play. Or if we realize that we didn't spend too much money on food, we can go and buy some very cool cake in the local cake shop, so that we can actually give them something. Or we can decide to prepare some more food and to give some food for them to take home. That's another thing. But these are all optional things that we're going to decide after we have the core plan finished. And this plan, as I said, is reverse planned, and so it actually will allow us to see how much time do we really need to prepare lunch. And as we can see here, if we put the who to invite as really not an important implementation, but rather like a planning stage, then we can say that the implementation takes Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. It takes 4 days for us to implement this, and that includes inviting people, preparing the menu, buying groceries, and cooking meals and setting the table. So this is how we figure out how much time do we need for any tactic that we do in an online campaign as well. So if we want to get something done, we need to see what are the ingredients for this to happen, and then to plan in reverse to figure out when do we need to start with the preparation of this event, whatever this event may be. It can be an online event, it can be a real event, it can be a new blog post, it can be an event that is happening in the street. It really doesn't matter. What matters is that these things are reverse planned. Okay, any questions? Okay, so let me just touch upon some other important issues. And these important issues are something that we cannot unfortunately cover in this course, because each of these issues requires probably a course on its own. And this is the next step in organizational management, the next step in managing your campaign and your human rights advocacy effort. And this is actually building your organization. And building organization needs to answer several important questions. First important question is how this organization is going to build skills of activists and organizers. Because building their skills and improving their skills in either writing blog posts or taking photos, which is something that we covered here, or in sharing the content on social media, is going to increase their efficiency in their work. But it's going to serve as a reward for their effort, because they're volunteers. They cannot be paid, and we don't have enough material resources to pay them anyway, but we can actually give them, provide them with the necessary skills that they can later use for something else, and this can be a reward for their effort. Another important issue is actually their involvement in decision making and ownership of the campaign, which means that you give them guidelines, not instructions. You don't tell them what to do, but you tell them what is expected them. But you also consult with them, explain what needs to be done, and show by your own example as a leader of a campaign. And you allow for their autonomy and their initiative, so they can do, based on the guidelines that you provided, they can do something on their own. So these are important questions. We cannot cover them here, but this is something that requires human rights advocacy groups to kind of think about. Another thing is something that we talked about briefly last week, and these are security considerations, because you need to also make sure that the security of the whole effort, and especially security of the people who are involved in this effort, is not jeopardized. And so when we talk about security, we're talking about securing content of communication, not channels of communication. So figuring out what needs to be confidential and what doesn't, what can be discussed in the open and what cannot be discussed in the open. And this also means that you need to educate the activists about security issues and how to not jeopardize, how not to brag, not to gossip, not to leak information. So these are all the things that they're so big that this course cannot cover them, but I just think that they are very important for aspects of organizational management. And so, to end, I'm just gonna show an example of the smallest organization in the world, and the smallest organization. When you have one person, that's not organization, but if you have two people, that already is an organization. And I'm using the example of this dancing couple. And so whatever the structure, whatever the human resource, material resource, or any other management we're talking about, whatever the campaign, whatever the effort, whatever the strategy is, the organization, whether it is 2 people or is it 100,000 people, it doesn't matter. It will require 3 ingredients for it to function. And the first ingredient is internal communication, so that people can communicate with each other inside the organization. of a campaign, or in this case the dancing couple. Another thing is coordination, so that they actually do things at the same time, and they do things that complement each other, so they're not as people who dance, they shouldn't step on each other's toes. And the third and the very important component is trust, because without trust there is no coordination, and trust is also very important where communication doesn't work. So when you don't have enough communication between people, then the only thing that remains is trust, that the other person is going to do what is necessary so that we don't step on each other's toes. And this is the example of the dancing couple, actually shows these three ingredients for a successful organization. And so with this I'm going to end. So what you're going to do in this class, in this week for the assignment, is actually just do a little estimate of the number of organizers and activists that you need for the implementation of the campaign that you're working on. This is probably not going to be very accurate, but any estimate is better than no estimate. Another, maybe even more important part of this estimate is actually to define positions within the campaign and specific responsibilities for each position, which means who are the people that are going to be involved in this campaign and what they're going to be doing. You don't know if when you define these positions, if this is going to require 5 or 10 or 50 people. But when you define positions, that means that the more people you have, then the more compartmentalized or more focused each of them can be on a particular task. If you have only one person or two people in the campaign, then they will be doing a lot of things that you defined as responsibilities. But it's important to define responsibilities regardless of how many people you have in a campaign effort. And with this, I will end, and I will see you on the discussion board. Thank you.
بهره برداری امن از موبایل و اینترنت، زن، حقوق فردی و اجتماعی، سازوکارهای جلوگیری از نقض حقوق بشر، پویشی در مفهوم دموکراسی، مروری بر پایگیری نهادهای مدنی در ایران، اندیشه‌های نوین از حقوق کارگران، آموزش خبرنگاری، حقوق شهروندی امروز و محیط زیست. توانا رایگان توانایی ما را به سمت انسان امروزین جهانی متمدن تازه می کند. برای شرکت در این کلاس ها به توانا.org بروید و با جیمیل مستعار ثبت نام کنید. از طریق فیسبوک، توییتر و شبکه یوتیوب می توانید آموزشکده توانا را دنبال کنید. توانا آموزشکده است برای جامعه مدنی ایران.